Good evening and welcome to Rock Solid News Evening Edition. I'm your host, Newfoundland. It's Saturday. It is December the 2nd, and we got a great one for you this evening. Tonight's episode, more millions for climate change and porta-potties for the homeless. So we'll see how that goes. We'll be back in about a minute.
So, the high school drama teacher over here accuses others of liking the sounds of their own voices.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I was a high school teacher before getting into politics, and I'm having a little trouble remembering what exactly the job that the Leader of the Opposition had before getting into politics.
Yes, and he left right in the middle of the semester, and I'm having trouble remembering why.
The small fringe minority who are holding unacceptable views do not represent the views of Canadians whose beds are filled with people who chose not to get vaccinated. The risk posed to all of us by unvaccinated people. It's never too late to do the right thing. We'll be immensely pleased to be able to give you that first dose of vaccine.
I'd like to welcome the fake news media,
and the ideology in order to push particular agendas, and I think some of those agendas, unfortunately, pretty hardcore, pretty extreme. The power of misinformation, because so much, of what we hear coming from these protesters, from a scientific perspective, just isn't true. And
can you state categorically? You are fake news, sir.
All right, welcome back, everyone. Welcome back to Rock Solid News Evening Edition. It's December the 2nd. It's Saturday. I hope you're having a good one, and we got a good one planned for you this evening. Tonight's episode is called More Millions for Climate Change and Porta-Potties for the Homeless. You can guess how this one's going to go, but we'll give you a quick glimpse. Take a look at your screen for those of you who are just listening. That is not, in fact, an evil hobbit. That is our environment minister, Stephen Guilbeault, I believe is how it's pronounced. If you're just watching, it actually is Stephen Guilbeault, but he looks just oddly like a evil hobbit. So 16 more million of Canadian dollars are going to fight climate change. We're going to go change the weather with 16 more million. And across the country, we've got homeless, obviously, not just vets, but everywhere. And they're getting porta-potties. And it's not even from the government. It's from a citizen-led coalition. And we'll get into that too. A couple more links along the way. But first, before we get started, support what you like. It's the concept that I've been pushing here on the stream ever since I started, and I'm not specifically talking about myself. Obviously, if you want to like and share the stream and comment, please. But there are many, many people doing this and better, much better, all over the internet. Rumble more specifically than, say, YouTube and Facebook, but either way. So if you like a podcaster or whatever, a news show, then support them. And that doesn't, I'm not saying financially. I mean, most people don't have the money. I don't. But if you do, if you're blessed with that, then by all means, yes, absolutely support them that way as well. But support can mean simply just sharing their content, hitting the like button, dropping a comment. Hey, Geraldine, how you doing? Nikki, we've got Elizabeth in there as well. More often than not, that's all it takes. Giving people that are doing good stuff like redacted news is a good one. they're on YouTube, but they're also on Rumble, and their show goes longer on Rumble because they can say better things on Rumble. So they have a quick half an hour, 45 minutes on YouTube, and then they transition straight to Rumble. And I'm not saying that they're always telling you the truth, but you're going to get something closer to the truth watching people like that than you are the mainstream. So support what you like. Give it a like, a share, a comment. And these guys are all doing great work. There's great people doing this. So if you like what they're doing, and that is a big if, give them some support. Remember, they don't have the slush fund, the media slush fund that Canada hands out, the Canadian government. So they don't have access to that. People like me, people even bigger, don't have access to that kind of stuff. So let's get down to tonight's episode. Let's get started. More millions for climate change and porta-potties for the homeless. Now, it's not just those two topics, but that I felt was a great contrast for the general topic, which is going to be money being spent. But where's the money being spent? Is it being spent here in Canada? If it is it being spent on Canadians, or is it being spent on government or government lackeys or government subsidiaries? You know what I mean? So money's being spent. I mean, there's a claim that we don't have any money. Nikki, you'll remember, you're old enough to remember, the veterans were asking for too much. Remember that. When they were asking for pensions and for access to better health care, the veterans here in Canada that had fought for this corporation, they were asking for too much. However, if you look at the track record of the government, spending is out of control. So it leads one to an obvious conclusion that they have priorities that differ from you. So what are we spending our money on rather than on Canadians and on Canada in general? Let's take a look at our first mainstream media story for tonight. Excuse me. Canada commits $16 million to new global climate change initiative. See if we can get this story brought up here on screen. Here we go. So Canada commits $16 million to new global climate damage fund. Again, this is not an evil habit. And for those of you who are just listening and not watching, that is our environment minister with the most evil frown imaginable. Yeah, we'll just keep going. So this is a treaty that happened in Dubai. So the leaders of the world flew from all over to Dubai so that they could have a circle jerk about what money can be spent in order to change the weather. Well, one thing they came up with was, let's make a damage control slush fund. Another new way for us to spend money. So 16 million from Canada, bunch from others. They think it's a significant step forward, Guilbeault said. Apparently, we've been ignoring this for almost 30 years, even though his government's been in power since, 2015, I believe. So the last 8 years, what have we been doing? You and your own government have been ignoring it, apparently. So right now, this damage control fund has 400 million US raised, with the likely suspects of the UAE and Germany and the United States, as well as Canada, being contributors. And Nikki rightfully pointed out, if you hug a politician, everything goes away. And Elizabeth pointed out he looks like he had a lobotomy, or he looks like he's currently having one. Either way, let's continue. Canada's contribution is about 18 million, or 11.8, million right now. They've committed 16 million. So we're going to try to change the weather through millions, through money. And now we're going to go and look at what else we're spending money on. So what else is the Corporation of Canada spending money on when in fact people like our veterans who simply want affordable health care and so on and so forth, they are asking for too much. So we'll get this one up. Now again, I have put a disclaimer out every time this topic gets brought up, because you see Israel on screen, so now people are going to freak out. I'm not advocating one way or the other for any side. Okay, that's not why this article is brought up. That's not why Al Jazeera is brought up in 2 days. So that's 100 people a day. Okay, I don't care whose side it is. I don't care who's doing it. I'm not here to show you pictures of dead babies, nations, and whether that's justified or not, I don't care. That's not why this is being brought up. We started with a slush fund in Israel, or in Ukraine, sorry. Pardon me. We started with the slush fund in Ukraine, and that very quickly, very, very quickly transitioned. There was overnight transition from a Ukraine-Russia conflict that we had to fund and spend money on and so on and so forth, and support and take sides on, to now Israel, Palestine, and that conflict, I guess we can call it. So you've got Canada committing millions to change the weather. You've got Canada committing millions and billions. I mean, 11 billion Canadian dollars have gone to Ukraine so far. Just allow that to sink in for you. 11 billion Canadian dollars of your hard-earned taxpayer money has gone to Ukraine alone in the last year. Now we're going to take a look at something else the Canadian government is spending money on. This time it's here in Canada, and in a ironic twist, it's being spent on Canadians. But you'll see why I say ironic as I bring it up. We'll see if StreamYard will we'll get this one up on screen for you. So the Canadian military veteran who criticized COVID-19 vaccine mandate pleads guilty. This is, of course, James Topp. He is a former Canadian soldier who protested the government's vaccine requirements, and he's facing a maximum punishment of dismissal with disgrace after pleading guilty in a military court on Tuesday. He was a warrant officer, criticized the vaccine for military members, and while he was in uniform, and he knew what he was doing when he committed this. He knew what punishment was coming. So the government again is spending money on prosecuting Canadian citizens who were critical of them rather than on the Canadian citizens who are homeless, who are jobless, who are in despair, who are living paycheck to paycheck, who are barely making ends meet, and so on and so forth. But we can put $11 billion worth of washing machines in Ukraine to launder the international funds. We can piss away $16 million to change the weather in climate change. And yeah, it's StreamYard is really crapping out here. And for if you're interested, guys, I'm plugged directly into an Ethernet right into my modem on fiber up internet. I've got a very well working laptop. It's not the equipment, just so we'll say. So spending money to prosecute veterans, and not just veterans. Some of you guys know the name James. Well, you know the name James Topp. Some of you guys know the name Jeremy McKenzie in Ontario. He was attempted to be prosecuted and tried by the government there. Tamara Litch, you guys all know that name. You guys know during the convoy days with Tamara Litch, you know that the Coots boys found themselves in some trouble. And some of them are still in jail, I believe. Eight of them in total, or 5 were in trouble. And this is money being spent. If you're from Newfoundland or know people from Newfoundland, Dana Metcalf is currently being prosecuted by the provincial Newfoundland government via the Nova Scotian Crown because they see it as a conflict of interest for the Newfoundland Crown to prosecute for the Newfoundland government. So they've passed it on and are now paying extra to have the Nova Scotian Crown Attorney prosecute Dana Metcalf here in Newfoundland. This is money being spent in the government's best interest rather than the people's. That's the only way to put it. Now we're going to try to bring up another article here. We'll see if StreamYard will crap out on us again. So we have 11 billion gone to Ukraine so far. Let the screen catch up to itself here for StreamYard. Okay, so we have 11 billion Canadian dollars, 11B with a billion Canadian dollars have already gone to Ukraine alone to fund that proxy war. And now we're dealing with that and Israel. And you had Canadian veterans asking for too much. This was before COVID. They were asking for too much money when they wanted things like healthcare and psychology type treatment and the like for things like PTSD and that which you get from combat, which is what they did for the government. And now we've got Israel, Gaza. And now you've got the Canadian government trying to prosecute James Topp, the Coots boys, Jeremy McKenzie, Tamara Litch, Dana Metcalf. The list goes on and on and on. However, here in little old Newfoundland, with 500,000 population, our capital city now has 2 tent city encampments. And the residents, we'll call them, of the tent city encampments at the Colonial Building, which is what used to be our government building when we were our own republic, or dominion, I should say, before we were frauded into joining Canada in 1949. They've been there now for over 2 months, I believe. They were on the provincial government's own doorstep. They were on the front lawn of the provincial government. And the provincial government couldn't do anything about it. I guess they were asking for too much. But here we are now. They got a porta potty down at Tent City. And I want to stress that the porta potty was not government driven. 2 porta potties were given. One was done by NAPE, which is the provincial equivalent of CUPE. NAPE here. And one was citizen led. So you see now, this is a park. This is a public park that families are meant to enjoy. And now there are homeless people living in tents with wood stoves and barbecues, and people that are from bigger places might laugh at me and think that, you know, it's a little naive of me to complain about this. We've had homeless people in Newfoundland, in St. John's at least, for even when I was a kid, and I'm mid-30s. There's been homeless people. I'm not. It's not a culture shock to have homeless people. To have mini encampments, tent cities that are semi-permanent on public land, and then to have the bathroom facilities that are closed down by the government, and then have the government refuse to provide them any sort of facilities to relieve themselves, and then to have citizens and a union step up to provide porta potties so that the people living there, and there are youths of some degree in that encampment, at least they have somewhere to relieve themselves. Here's a look at Tent City. I'm going to try to press play on this, and we'll see if StreamYard allows it to play or if it just simply craps out.
You're not taking me alive! Hey, he's only kidding. Where's my love? Oh, yes,
So that's a look at what's going on at the Tent City in St. John's. Again, that's in Bannerman Park. There's tunnels, there's homeless shelters, there's empty hotels, there's even in a housing crisis here in Newfoundland. I know wherever you are in Canada or wherever, there's housing crises there as well. But even here in little old Newfoundland, the real estate crash is hurting us, and there's a housing crisis here, but they're giving away a lot of the housing to immigrants, which simply leads to negative feelings from the hosts when their own government puts newcomers ahead of them. That's simple. And in case you think that I'm exaggerating about immigration being a problem, here in Canada, I'll just quickly remind you with 15 seconds of footage from Toronto Bay Street.
It's happening in Toronto, Canada, Bay and Wellington.
Allahu Akbar. So God is great in Toronto Bay Street with the city shut down. The street shut down, so that hundreds, if not 1,000 Muslims can pray in Toronto. And you've heard stories in cold places. I think Colorado was actually highlighted for this. They had homeless people that would commit petty crimes in the winter in order to be incarcerated over the winter, so that they would have a roof over their head, meals, and a place to sleep. Well, that here exists here in Canada as well. See if we can get the very last link to pop up on the screen here. And they're going to highlight the tent city again here, as you can see. Amid a housing crisis, jail seen as preferable to living on the street. All I want for Christmas is a home with part of a tent encampment here, and the rest of it is over behind here. And here is the public park. This story is, and they take his story about how he would, towards the winter, he would steal food and purposely get caught and refuse bail, because why would he get bail out? The whole purpose was to be incarcerated. Why not? Declining bail in September because he needs to go back to jail. This is not a story from Colorado. This is not a story from New York, from Toronto, Vancouver. This is St. John's, Newfoundland. We have 500,000 people in the province. If it's getting this bad in little old Newfoundland, how bad is it in Toronto? How bad is it in Vancouver, in Winnipeg, Edmonton? These places have had many encampments all over forever. But for the grace of God, there go I, or today us. Very well said. Very well said. Spending money prosecuting veterans, but can't spend money to help any of them, right? Jeremy McKenzie, James Topp, both of them are Canadian veterans. James is for sure. Jeremy, I believe he is. So as a recap on tonight's content here, guys, the Canadian government has spent billions of dollars to fund proxy wars, and it's not just it's not even just Ukraine, it's not even just Israel. Guys, you can go all the way back. Every single foreign conflict that we've been involved in since the dawn of time has been a money laundering scheme, a global banker war that hasn't had any tangible effect on you here in this country. Yet millions and billions of your tax dollars has gone to fund one side or the other, or both, as we've seen in every single conflict. Just start looking back. Forget Israel and Palestine. Forget Ukraine and Russia. Just go back and start naming Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Libya, Lebanon, Kosovo, Sudan, Bosnia, Somalia, the Gulf War, Panama, Grenada, Dominican Republic, if you can remember that. Vietnam, obviously, Korea, and then you start getting into the world wars. The Prescotts and the Bushes were funding literal both sides of both great world wars. And you wonder how it's not treason, because it's government sanctioned. What does that tell you? That they're willing to spend billions of dollars to kill rather than to spend minimal amounts to save. That is the trademark of somebody who's evil. That is the trademark of a psychopath. That is not the trademark of someone you should be making a vow to have represent you in any way, shape, or form. And I know there's a big feeling of Trudeau has to go. And Trudeau has to go for a lot of reasons. Yeah, sure. However, You're being set up to have this guy step in and nothing will change.
Do you think it was responsible for you to call yesterday's explosion by the checkpoint at the Rainbow Bridge terrorism when no U.S. or Canadian officials said that was or authorities said that was the case, and when the New York governor also said there was no evidence to suggest terrorism activity?
Actually, you're wrong. You're a CP? Okay, so CP, by the way, CP, just for everyone's knowledge, did have to make 3 corrections for falsehoods that they put into a single article. I think that might be unprecedented. I'm actually thinking about checking with the Guinness Book of World Records to see if there's ever been a news agency that has had to issue 3 corrections for patent falsehoods that they admit they had been made in one single article, and now you've made yet another falsehood in your question. Where you are...
So he's doing the populist answer. He's giving us the Canadian toned down Trump whatever. And that's who you're being set up for. So as I end this stream, like I do with most streams, when it comes down to this, we're getting ready for a election here in Canada. It's any minute now. The best vote you can make, you don't even have to wait for an election. You can make this vote Monday morning. Monday morning when you wake up, as long as it's past 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, you can call Elections Canada and you can request to be removed from the eligible voters list. And what this does is it takes you away, so you're no longer even eligible to vote in elections. It's a great feeling. I've been this way for 2 federal elections now, and it's fantastic, and you get to make the vote whenever you want. Now, that being said, I understand that many people think that if you don't vote, you can't complain, and without voting, Trudeau's going to stay in, and whatever. Fair enough. If you insist on partaking in a selection campaign for a corporation, if that's your insistence, my only plea would be this: don't vote for any of the major 3 parties. You've got the Liberals, the Conservative, and the NDP. Mentally scratch 3 of those off your ballot, and then look at who's left and make a decision. To eeny, meeny, miny, mo, whatever. Maybe one of the local candidates, so you pick that person. I don't know. But not voting and removing yourself as even someone who would be eligible to vote once one came sends a message, an absolute message. And you can imagine if that was done in any sort of actual numbers. However, like I said, I don't believe enough people want that or are willing to do that. I think many people think that they have to participate in these things. So here's how you put the screw in their plan. Don't vote for one of their proposed major parties. There are, if you're in Quebec, the Bloc is one of those parties as well. But outside, you've got the Green Party and the PPC, and then you've got random parties like the Christian Heritage Party. There's even the Canadian Communist Party. Listen, obviously none of these other parties, these independents, are ever going to win. Okay? Why not throw your vote that way? If you just go in and write, F Trudeau on your ballot or something, that's not going to get counted in any meaningful way. It's just another spoiled ballot. But if you remove yourself, or if you just start voting for the little guy, that's the way for you to. It's like being a consumer and talking with your wallet. So yeah, we need to take Canada back. Absolutely, Karen. And listen, there's a couple of ways that can happen, but if you're not going to do it through the government, then it's going to be done through civil unrest, and that's not ideal. And that's not what I'm promoting. What I'm promoting is not participating. Remove yourself. Or if you insist on participating, participate in a tongue-in-cheek way that still sends a message. Or keep voting for the big guys and keep doing the Liberal Tory same old story and see if Pierre Poilievre saves the day. But keep in mind, he couldn't bring himself to defend parental rights until it became cool. He said, oh, we'll have to let the provinces decide. And it was something extremely simple as should a parent be informed about what happens to, a 12-year-old kid at school. Well, absolutely. There's a softball question for you to reel the conservatives in. And he said, well, we should let the let the provinces decide. That's a provincial issue. Yes, we know it's a provincial issue. So is everything else you find the gumption to comment on because you've been told by your polling advisor that it's okay to talk about. But at that point, your polling advisor had told you, it's still a coin toss. Don't go one way or the other. So Pierre polling data Poilievre couldn't defend parental rights. How long did it take the Conservative Party to defend the Freedom Convoy? And defend is a very aggressive way to put what they actually did, because they didn't defend. They could have properly defended. Any party could have properly defended that movement in a way that would have legitimized it, but they didn't. Why? Because it's the Canadian Uniparty. It's an illusion of choice. It's illusion of change. It's one bird with two wings, a left wing and a right wing. But at the end of the day, that bird brings you to the same destination. So find a third, fourth, fifth, or sixth wing to vote for. Jump off this bird and go to another bird. Find a safe place to jump off and land in water. I don't know. Whatever your metaphor has to be, but something's got to change. Something has to give. Otherwise, we're headed for what history tells us is a total economic collapse, a total moral and decaying collapse. And if there's any truth to anything in the Bible, you know what happens when the moral part happens. We know what happens when a financial collapse occurs. And it's literally in the making right now. There's another part of the world, BRICS, that's taking that on head on. And we in the West are boldly ignoring it. And, that is a bold strategy, and we'll see how far it gets us. In the meantime, it's been fantastic. Saturday, December 2nd. Thank you guys for tuning in. Rock Solid News Evening Edition. I'm your host, Newfoundland. And you people, you stay sovereign, okay?